Welcome to the Explainer. You know that groggy pre-coffee feeling in the morning where you aren't entirely sure who you even are yet? Well, today we're going to completely dismantle everything you thought you knew about who you are, how you remember, and how you interact with the world around you. We're looking at a truly radical framework from our source material called the Layered Consciousness OS Theory. It's this brilliant blend of computer science, linguistics, and cognitive philosophy that literally redefines the human mind.
Just think about this for a second. We usually think of ourselves as having a fixed personality, right? Like there's a permanent, unchanging core deep down inside of us. But what if you aren't a static entity at all? What if instead your mind is actually like a highly sophisticated operating system that powers down at night, updates its code, and literally reboots a brand new version of you every single morning?
And this brilliantly illustrates how the source material completely reframes human existence. It argues that you are not a fixed class, you are a living signifier. Basically, you're a node in a massive network that wakes up, boots up a temporary operating state consisting of your memories, predictive models, and social protocols, and then just goes to work. So let's break down exactly how this fascinating mechanism functions.
Let's start with part 1, the daily consciousness reboot. To really grasp this theory, we have to totally rethink waking up.
Traditionally, we've used sleep as a simple pause button. You go to sleep, you wake up, and you're exactly the same person you were yesterday. But the source material argues that sleep is actually the disassembly of your daytime communication protocols. While you're resting, your brain is actively adjusting its weights based on yesterday's experiences. When you wake up, you weren't the identical person from the day before. You've essentially cleared your cache, installed the latest updates, and rebooted a fresh version of yourself that has fully integrated yesterday's history.
This means consciousness isn't some permanent ghost sitting inside your brain. It's a strictly temporary, highly distributed execution state. Think of it as a protocol that connects your physical body, your immediate environment, and the social expectations placed on you in real time. You're booting up the exact specific OS required to navigate your reality at that very moment.
Moving to part 2, memory as predictive weights. If our minds are basically operating systems, how exactly does this OS handle and store its data?
Okay, let's dive into this, because this is where the theory gets incredibly interesting. We typically think of memory as this giant video storage warehouse, a place where we go to look at the past. But honestly, that's a myth. Memory isn't designed to look backward at all. It's a machine designed entirely to predict the future. The source actually compares it to the predictive algorithm weights in a neural network.
They break this down into 2 types. First, you have concept memory. This isn't some mental file cabinet. It's a set of compressed statistical weights that instantly tells you, hey, that's a coffee cup. Second is narrative memory. And this isn't for telling stories about your past. It calculates state transition probabilities. So narrative memory predicts, if I push that coffee cup, it's going to spill. When there's an error in your prediction, these 2 memory networks are just constantly updating and correcting each other.
So the crucial point here is that short-term memory is absolutely not just a temporary holding cell. It is an active, real-time editing desk. It's the exact interface where your deeply ingrained predictive weights literally crash into your present experience. It decides how to slice up reality based on the algorithms you've already built over your lifetime.
All right, part 3, the strict society OS. Because our internal OS obviously doesn't exist in a vacuum, we have to download software from the outside world.
The source material describes modern life as being governed by what they call the strict, rigorous society OS. This is a dominant external operating system that forces this continuous loop of evaluation, performance grading, and constant comparison onto all of us. It's a somewhat dystopian societal protocol, really, that reduces the rich, layered human experience into measurable scores, rankings, and these very low-dimensional metrics.
And there's a really crucial distinction in how we react to this system. We so often think that being more productive or getting better grades is personal growth. But the theory calls this mere self-optimization. You're just getting better scores within a rigged OS. True reflection, on the other hand, is entirely different. It requires actually stepping back and questioning the grading system itself.
This brings us to a really profound realization. True reflection means debugging the societal software we've all been handed. It's a historical and structural escape act. It isn't about running the malicious app faster. It's about asking who installed this app on your mind in the very first place, and what power structures rely on it running smoothly.
So what does this all mean?
What actually happens when our internal OS interacts with this external network? If we're constantly running these internal prediction models and battling external societal programs, what happens when we finally take action in the world?
While this brings us back to that concept of the living signifier. Under this theory, you are not just an independent actor who uses language as a tool. Not at all. You are a living node plugged directly into a massive societal network. You read signals, you output actions, and in doing so, you don't just express yourself. You actually update the code of the entire system.
Let's break down the anatomy of a human action, what the source calls the action signifier triad. It's got 3 parts. Step 1 is intent, which is the direction you want to move reality. But remember, your free will here is already heavily shaped by your past updates. Step 2 is meaning, the background context and memory networks that actually generate the action. And step 3 is the target, the specific node or person in the network you are trying to communicate with or change.
Once you take that action, a feedback loop kicks in immediately. First, there's the actualization, like speaking a sentence out loud or making a choice. Second, someone else, or the environment, reads that action. And third, the update occurs. Taking action doesn't just change the listener, it updates the speaker, the listener, and the entire historical corpus of the network simultaneously.
So we can officially throw out that old model of the isolated, independent subject acting on a passive, empty world. That's done. Instead, you are a living signifier. Every single time you act, you are literally pushing a code update across a layered, interconnected network. I mean, no pressure, right? But seriously, your actions change the probability of what will happen next for absolutely everyone.
Moving to part 5, history as layered updates. Let's expand this tech metaphor from individual action to the grand scale of history.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that history isn't just something passively written in textbooks. It is actively recorded across every single layer of existence. There's physical history in matter, biological history in our cells, neural history in the synapses of our brains, symbolic history in our language, and institutional history in our societal rules. History is literally layered right into the fabric of reality.
And this layered view completely changes how we understand psychological pain, which really reframes so many of our own daily anxieties. And the source explains that trauma is not just a big prediction error, it's actually a false grounding. Trauma acts like a recurring bug, a corrupted file or malware in your code. Because of past layered history, a tiny new event can trigger this glitch, hijacking the OS and forcing it to misinterpret a totally harmless situation as a massive existential threat.
The sources scaled us up to what they called the 3 big bangs of natural history. First, you have the physical explosion of matter. Second, the biological explosion of life. And third, the symbolic explosion of language and society. Each of these domains formed a massive corpus, like a giant data set of patterns that our personal operating systems are constantly drawing from and interacting with.
To sum up this incredibly profound view of existence, the source states, history is the accumulated learning history of traces of events across all layers, changing the probability distribution of the next state. Simply put, every single action you take leaves a trace. It shifts the weights. It changes the conditions of the next morning's reboot for you and for the entire world around you.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. If you are not a fixed self, but a dynamic, interconnected network updating every single day, what code will your actions write into the societal OS tomorrow? You are a growing, living signifier. How you boot up and the updates you push to the network today will literally become the history that the world reboots from tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning your OS, and I'll see you next time.